thank you so much for having me. I actually, I have to probably give a caveat here when you say expert panelist, because I'm most certainly not worthy of that at all. I'm a career cop. I don't have a degree in psychology, but just to give you a little background, I started as a young patrol officer to take note of every time I would go on a call and I would see human beings and perhaps the same incident. Let's use a car accident, for example, where some people completely broke down and couldn't handle it, while other people were very resilient about it. No, it's just a piece of metal, and I started to wonder how resilience is built. And it was so interesting to me. So then as I started to move through the ranks in my police department, I started to notice the same about police officers. We have some police officers that are very resilient, while others can, go to the same horrific scene and have issue with it. And, part of the tenure in my tenure of policing has been to try to change the culture so that that officer who is experiencing the struggle or the lack of resilience asks for help. And I'm getting to Awe in just a second, but bear with me as I get there. And we've created a culture in policing where that has been absolutely taboo. I have heard my own superiors say, hey, if you can't handle it, get out of this profession. And that's the exact opposite what we want to create, especially in policing, because guys, hurt people, right? And so I started to delve into this concept, and out in the audience is a man named Michael Neela, and he's a former commander in our police department, but he built a curriculum. He's the founder of Blue Courage. So I joined in on this team where we looked at and teach police officers resilience and positive psychology. Because from what we can see is traditional psychology says, asks, what's wrong with you, where positive psychology asks what's right with you. Well, there's still some resistance in policing because when we try to bring in mindfulness, cops push back, right? Because it's like, it's not macho. And so I've even heard cops call it granola. So, what we do is we just change the term from meditation to tactical breathing. Anytime you throw the word tactical in front of it, cops are all in. But we're fighting always the negative default. And this is going to sound like an excuse for police officers, but when police officers see the worst of the worst every day, you call 911 not because, you just want to say hello. You call 911 because something horrific has happened. And it starts to feel like 1,000 tiny cuts. And, it's like if a mechanic were to work on broken cars all day, they may assume that all cars are broken. And we all know that's not true. So I understand that these awe-inducing events are the things that produce personal change and growth. But it seems to me that, as you mentioned, we stumble upon these things, or maybe we're so busy in our lives that these moments move right past us because we're unconscious. So how can we train ourselves? How can I train my police officers to stop and look for these moments of awe?
Yeah, what a brilliant summary of where we are in many of the service-oriented professions, right? Veterans, our police officers. I've worked with veterans, and I do a lot of work with healthcare providers who feel the same. It's just chaos and people dying and lots of trauma. And so first, let's just think about resilience, right? Resilience is when, in the face of stress, when your cortisol rises, HPA axis is activated, and you're being overtaken by it. What are the shifts in your mind and in your social community that can move you towards this other profile of high vagus nerve activation, less inflammation, greater ability to concentrate through your prefrontal cortex? How can we shift out of trauma stress to engagement and courage? And I think that you hit upon two things that are really powerful for your community. One is to conceptualize things in terms of courage, right? And we had stories in our research. Some of the veterans that we've worked with talk about reconceptualizing their work in terms of the courage of their colleagues, the courage of the people they serve. I have interviewed a medical doctor who was dealing with people dying, and he was astonished at how much courage his patients showed, right? And a really interesting thing for people to do is to share stories, right, of courage. I do this with every group I teach, is like, let's talk about something awesome your colleague did, right? Once a week at a team meeting, and you get these stories going, which helps do what you're talking about, Chief, which is, how do I look at my work in terms of not handling the worst of human nature, but being bolstered by the best of human nature? Because courage is the best of human nature. And then the second thing is, just to be thinking about team. That, I, in the context of studying Awe, got to interview Steve Kerr, the coach of the Golden State Warriors. And, he deals with a lot of stress and, big egos and losses and the like. And he's like, everything we do as a culture and as a leader here is orienting towards how do we kind of think about the team dimensions of our work. It's a no-brainer, but when you talk about people need to ask for help, they need to collaborate, is critical. So, but I love the emphasis on courage.
Absolutely. And I think there's an important distinction to be made there, is that there's no lack of bravery in law enforcement, but there is a lack of courage. And bravery is easy. That's the action oriented. That's the thing that cops are really good at. I'm going to run towards that thing that people run away from. Where courage, and that's where that resilience comes in, is that courage to say, man, that scene that I was just on was really hard for me, and it's a little bigger than me, and I think I need to ask for help. And then also, and then I'll turn it back over. But another thing that you mentioned, the word purpose, and it gets thrown around so much that I believe it gets watered down. But
I agree.
I tend to think that it's a constant reminder. It truly is the drum that we have to keep beating, because if I tell my police officers, go out there and make arrests, write tickets, right? Well, those are things. But truly, when you look at why we do, the why behind the do, why do we write tickets for speeding? So we save lives, so people slow down, and so they don't crash and hurt themselves, and when we make arrests, when we look at it as contributing to justice for a crime victim, when you think of that, it aligns yourself, and that in itself creates, I think, awe. So just
for leaders out there, just to pick up on your brilliant comment, Chief, if you're leading a branch of police, or a tactical team, and you are engaging in feedback with your team, it's good to ask, like, where do you feel awe? What really is most meaningful for you in this work? And there you'll find the deeper version of purpose that you're pointing us to.